One quick one.
And I did, I can share my screen in a moment that and pull up the document that goes over kind of like the overview of the coalition and the various committees.
Again, good morning, everybody's here. Just want to kind of bring folks update where we are, and then kind of sit into this conversation around the committees. Where we last left off was with communication to the council, and as well as conversation in reference to organizing a meeting amongst individuals who had questions and concerns about some of the direction that the coalition itself has pushed action council, and council has even agreed to move forward into based upon where we are right now with that pause. Two things. One, in the month of July, council takes essentially a recess from business in the month of July. And in my conversation with the council member who was willing to help organize that meeting, they're still committed to doing so. But in the beginning of the month or at the end of the month, trying to remember, I had the conversation with them whenever they had the retirement event for Lee, that they were still willing to do that, but it would be after July, after the recess for the month of July, and getting that organized and put together. With that being said, though, I do believe that it's prudent, even amongst coalition, as we look at the original kind of emphasis for where we are, our committees, and if in fact things don't turn back around and we don't continue to move forward in the direction that we were in, and we don't get additional direction from the council, based on where we are, how do we function? How do we move within the existing committee structure? And there are things that may be happening within the city and Marlo's area that the committees may be able be better suited to have conversation and dialogue to engage with. And so with that brings us forward to this conversation today, to just kind of look at them, look at the committees, look at where folks, again, think they continue to fit in or desire to fit in, and then kind of move from there. Wasn't a heavy agenda for us today, but I didn't want us to go 2 months without having some engagement and conversation. And this was something for us to be able to make sure that we dealt with and move forward with. So with that, I can turn it to you, Marla, for us to kind of look at those committees.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this is it. Yes. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is really kind of like an overview document of the purpose of the coalition. So it outlines what the responsibilities are, as you see, is to identify and recommend strategies around expanding opportunities, engaging supporters and advocates, seeking resources, and advising the council on how to support housing development. And everyone should have gotten this early on. And if you don't have it or need a refresher, just let me know and I can resend it. But this talks about our responsibilities, to look at how we improve the quality and the quantity of housing, help people access it, other strategies for home ownership, what kind of community outreach and public relations we can do to get the word out about what we're trying to do. And then certainly the biggest and most concerning part is, identifying sustainable long-term resources. And we're also required to do an annual report to the city council, which, excuse me, I'm sorry, we usually do late in the calendar year. So we move down, it talks about, when we meet. And even though the idea is to really meet quarterly, with the working groups or committees working in between the quarterly meetings, we had started meeting monthly, especially as we were gearing up to do the work with Housing NOLA. And the last time we actually had committee breakouts was late 2019, so really just before COVID. But when you see here, there are 3 main committees, and these were outlined in the council action that established the coalition. And so the 3 committees are housing stock, and you see here what the activities are under that and areas to be addressed. So we have diversity of housing types and locations. How do we foster preservation of existing affordable housing? How do we expand our infrastructure to stimulate greater and expanded services and innovative ways for expanding affordable housing? And so, for instance, last year, the coalition submitted a position statement to City Council on ADUs. I think we also submitted a position statement on cottage courts as innovative ways to expand affordable housing. So that was in keeping with this particular charge. Under housing access and services, how do we look at developing long-term affordable rental and ownership homes? How do we look at potential rent supplement mechanisms? How do we educate employers on the benefits of employer-assisted housing? And how do we, again, reach the community and help them understand the various opportunities and responsibilities on having access to and creating affordable housing? And then the last committee, long-term planning and resources, this committee is looking at the longer term, the bigger picture. Again, funding, you'll see, comes up in all of these. How do we create public and private partnerships to implement a comprehensive housing strategy? And then exploring the viability of land banking and or community land trust to achieve long-term housing affordability. So, when we look back over the last couple of years, there are elements of this that the coalition has actually been discharging. We were ready to move forward with Housing NOLA, and that's the part about, the public-private partnerships and comprehensive housing strategies. We engaged the School of Government Development Finance Initiative to talk to us about land banking. And there is conversation currently going on. We had started it some time ago, actually just before COVID, talking with Baptist Hospital and Novant about employer-assisted housing. Those conversations are about to restart with support from the mayor. He started reaching out again, not only about the employer-assisted housing, but the bigger picture of creating some kind of housing trust fund or investment fund. And they are, when I say they, the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Councilmember Clark, and Councilmember McIntosh are actually going to visit Charlotte, and Charlotte has both a housing trust fund and a housing investment fund. They're going to also visit Asheville, which has a housing trust fund, and that housing trust fund is managed by the city. In Charlotte, the housing trust fund is managed by the city, but the housing investment fund is managed by a third-party entity, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or commonly known as LISC. And then there's going to be some conversation with Self-Help, which is managing the Wake County investment fund, and Greensboro is starting a fund as well. And so because Self-Help is involved with both of those, Self-Help will share some information, and we may also have the opportunity to talk with some of the principals from Wake County as well as Greensboro. So like I was saying, a lot of some of this has already been in play. I think probably at this juncture, until we get clear on what we'll be able to do in partnership with Housing NOLA, these are the things that we could come back and revisit, kind of take stock of what we've done and what we need to do going forward. There was one other something I was
Marla,
going to mention. Yes.
is there a thought process, or do you think that there's an opportunity for members of this coalition to join the mayor and council members in some of these meetings and visits to make sure we're all aligned with the same vision? Or maybe that's, Derwin, something that should be on the agenda when the meeting that you were referencing occurs. I'm just curious if there's a way to ensure that there's alignment here, given what's occurred in the first 6 months of the year.
Right. I think that is a real possibility. I mean, because of the number of council members that are participating, it is one where we'll be giving notice of basically a public meeting, because I believe it's the majority of the finance committee that's taking these trips. And I can tell you right now, the trip to Asheville is on August 17th, and the meeting time is 10:30. The trip to Charlotte is August 24th at 10:30. And the meeting with Self-Help will be here, and the representative from Self-Help will come to Winston. And that meeting will probably be the 29th of August at 10:30, and we'll do it probably in council chambers. We're just trying to clear up a couple of loose ends on that one, but it looks like that one will be August 29th. So, we were really trying to get this moving around this conversation of seeking funding. I've also provided the council members with some information on the structures of housing trust funds and a lot of the considerations that need to be taken note of, and have also reached out to something that's called the Housing Trust Fund Project, which is through an organization called Community Change. And their mission is just to help communities establish trust funds. So they've also been provided that particular information as well. So between having that information and the opportunity to speak with the various communities to learn about, what precipitated them creating the funds, what were some lessons learned, things that they might do differently in the future, and just in any of the operational ins and outs, those will all be shared.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to see if there was anything else that I needed to highlight about the committees. Derwin, anything else that comes to mind that I maybe didn't address as we look at the committees?
No, I think you covered that well with the committees, and one of the things I think that you mentioned in terms of, I don't know if we have it. I remember, I think we had something before that kind of showed some of that checklist that you were going over, just showing that we've been checking off some of those items there. It was writing a note. I don't want to be the dead horse, but some of those things that, that are coming up in those conversations have been some things that, Housing NOLA, is going to help us facilitate.
Right. Right. Well, and to that point, I know that there is some conversation with the same council members and the mayor about having a housing summit, which was one of the main things that Housing NOLA was working towards. And so I think being able to have that conversation with the elected officials about how that can be useful to really bring Housing NOLA back into the mix, because from a capacity standpoint, one of my questions is always, who's going to be able to facilitate putting a summit together and really making it as robust and engaged as possible, right? So, I think that this is really timely, this conversation, and then their desire to have a summit I think together really kind of brings back this whole conversation around the engagement with Housing NOLA. One thing I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say to that end, I think Ryan made a really good point in terms of asking about any engagement from the coalition with the council in some of those meetings. I recall, and I don't remember the year, but there was a number of us from the council who took a trip to Baltimore, and actually the same group that's now working, the developer group who's doing development for the Choice neighborhood. Can't think of their name right now.
McCormick Barron.
Yeah, McCormick Barron. McCormick Barron, a similar development that they had done in Baltimore. And so it was in partnership with the Housing Authority, McCormick Barron's, and multiple council members went. And there were kind of regular folks who went with folks up there to that. So I think there's precedents for some of that engagement, and there's a group of folks that desire. I think it's worthwhile making it known that there's a desire for the members of the coalition would like to send some folks along, and I think that also would be helpful, even some relational conversations to be able to have during that time too.
And so, and I would ask if anybody, on the call today definitely wants to participate, let me know so I can get that to the council and to those who are hosting the meetings. Because I've taken the initial steps of coordinating with the local officials, to set up the meetings, and, they've asked the question, who all is attending. And so I'd love to be able to give them an update to let them know that, we'll have some members of the coalition in attendance as well. So everybody will be prepared. And like I said, the 2 dates are solid for Asheville and Charlotte, and we're almost certain the 29th of August for the one here in town with self-help.
Given that we've got somewhat limited attendance today, I might suggest or ask if you wouldn't mind emailing those dates out to everyone, and we can prompt particularly those that aren't here to provide you that guidance too.
Okay. One other thing too, before I forget again, as it relates to the trust fund model or investment, I mean, we could even possibly do a hybrid. One of the things that we've talked about is any vehicle or any option that we pursue, it would be advisable to identify what would be a recurring source of revenue. That's one of the features of a housing trust fund, different from an investment fund, is that the trust funds usually have some regular source of funding that is recurring and long-term. So be it, some of the examples are a 50-cent or $1 charge for recording deeds or mortgages, that is designated to go to the trust fund. That's one of the ways some communities have done it, and various other mechanisms. But the main thing is we have to have some kind of revenue that continually flows into the fund as monies flow out of the fund, because depending on how we set it up, the fund could provide grants, it could provide loans, so a lot of that has to be decided. What kind of structure would the investments be that go into developments, and then certainly how do we maintain a source of funding for the long term. So that is one of the things we've talked about, is potential recurring sources of revenue and what that might look like.
Yeah. So in reference to, so when we look at the committees, one of the things I know in terms of the conversation was whether or not we wanted to look coming into August on setting up some times for those committees to have some conversation dialogue around some of those areas. And maybe that's a time to look at the checklist. Okay, what have we done what are we checked off, what do we actually accomplished, and then what are the areas that are in here that still need to be worked on. But then I think the secondary part of that is also, member makeup of the committees. Who's serving on what and who desires to serve on what committees. I know that was an area we were getting ready to step into when we were talking through Housing NOLA, because we were looking at how to break out that work, whatever the work that was going to come out of Housing NOLA. How do we put those under the each one of the committees? And we believed at that time that everything could fall under at least one of those committee structures that we had there. And so I think regardless of that direction with them, I think if our goal and our desire is still to try to reignite that, it's still important for us to figure out the committees, because there was a role for the committees to play within that work. So again, because of the numbers we have, I think I saw George jump on too, wondering what's the best method for us to kind of go. Folks kind of to throw out here their desires. They want to kind of continue where they were serving, or if it's better for us to maybe do a doodle of some sort to send out to people to kind of check the box on which one. I'm fine with other direction, but just trying to make sure we get the best participation from folks and their voices in the process.
I'm open to either idea. I do like kind of the concept of the doodle poll, and because it would, or however, online poll to be able to capture everybody's feedback. But I know also you can kind of generally see how those votes are going, and so hopefully we would, folks will kind of self-select such that we've got equal representation.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good direction for us to go then.
So one kind of process question, just thinking about people's ability to spend time. Would you want to try to do committees in August if some of you are going to try to also go on the road to some of these communities, around the trust fund or investment fund? I don't know if that's too much of an ask. To try to do all in August.
I think that's a good point, but I would also say that I think it was said earlier, send out those dates to everyone and check the participation to see who would actually be wanting to go on the road. If participation was pretty slim, we could probably still do both.
Sure. Okay.
And what would be the date if we didn't do committees, we had a regular meeting? I'm trying to see, is that the what day that would be?
Let's see, the regular meeting. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry, I put up something here. Calendar.
Is it 25th?
That sounds about right. Yes.
Okay. And I was looking at that is that if it's opposite, if it still is a place where we do have a decent number of folks that may want to engage and attend there, then maybe we keep our regular meeting as just kind of checking if folks have participated in those other two. There may be some conversation and dialogue worthwhile having with the larger group. Know that the 29th would not have happened. Whatever conversation with self-help would not have happened. But I think George makes a good point. Send it out, kind of see what comes, and then we can kind of make a decision based on folks' participation, which route is the best way to go on meetings, whether it's committee, regular meeting, or if we've got a large participation across the board and others, then maybe these three are our meetings for August, just depending on.
Okay. All right, we'll put that together.
Cool. Would you like me to make the doodle poll?
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right.
And then you just let me know what I need to send you, to support that.
If you could send me the just that same document with the committees on it, I know where it's at, but if you have it easily.
The one that I just shared on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Cool. All right. That was the crux of our conversation around the committees. I'm not sure if you had anything else, Marla, but I had one thing I did want to throw out to the group. But do you have anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. It is a question here, and I don't know if there's a role or not a role to play at all. But just in reading the paper this morning, and particular outside of Winston, particular conversation in Kernersville around development and how the council, their board of aldermen kind of turned down the developer's request there. John, I don't know anything outside of what I read in the paper. Maybe you may know a little more about that development. But I was just wondering, we're talking about Winston-Salem, but somebody that's looking to build 3,000 housing units in the county has a big impact on what happens in Winston-Salem as well. And just wondering whether or not there is something around, whether it's the larger conversations of what we're doing here in the city, whether it's the housing summit, or whether or not there's some informal engagement with the other municipalities in the county on a quarterly basis of something, just to get a sense of what's happening in these other municipalities in the county, whether it's Kernersville, Clemens, Rural Hall, whatever. Just that if there's folks building in those areas, creating housing in those areas, it makes a difference. And one of the things that I saw as a concern, and one of those that we've talked about pushing, is having varying housing types, meaning having townhomes and having your single family, but also your multifamily, and having these in mixed in together in areas. And so that was some of the heartburn based on what I was reading that the board had, and we're pushing for that kind of stuff in the city. So I think it's an interesting thing that's happening. And like I said, I don't know, because we're talking about the city of Winston-Salem, but someone who's building or desires to build that much housing in the county has an impact on I think what happens even in the city, just in terms of folks' access. Because if they can't find it here, and they want to stay in the area, they're gonna look within proximity.
To that point, it just occurred to me, in addition to maybe meeting with some of the surrounding communities, is there an opportunity for there to be some kind of conversation with the Board of Commissioners for Forsyth County? Because we're all in the same county. And, I know that there's been some discussion about, what types of housing the commission supports. And so I'm just wondering if this idea might also be a prelude to a larger conversation with members of the Forsyth County Commissioners.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful too. I know I've had at least one council commissioner recently reached out saying that they wanted to talk about housing, that they were interested in having some conversation there. So I think that might be that's definitely one of the things there. John, I saw you came off mute a second ago.
Yeah. Just a couple of points. Yeah, I totally agree with you that we don't function in a vacuum. The housing, people commute to jobs. People, we have these invisible lines that are our borders, but the average person who's buying a home really doesn't care, right? They're just looking for a place to live. So, I think I know our charges for the city of Winston-Salem, but we're impacted by things outside of Winston-Salem. So I think you're totally on point. When it comes to the housing mix, there's a bill in the state right now that would require municipalities to allow duplex, triplex, quadplex in single-family zoned residential. So by default, you would get a mix. Within certain constraints, but so there are things outside of our purview that are going to impact our work, and I think just, if nothing else, being aware of them is going to be important.
Definitely.
Mr. Montgomery, could I just share something on this as well?
Yep.
You all remember at the last meeting, Amy Crum on planning staff gave a presentation on the new comprehensive plan Forward 2045. And of course, one of the big discussion points that's going to be undertaken as part of that plan is what is the appetite of the community for broadening the range of housing types that are allowed by right in these kind of traditionally single family neighborhoods like John was mentioning. And again, I think that's something that this coalition will be a valuable contributor to that process. And we're going to be having those public kickoff meetings in October. And certainly we can talk more about that as we get closer. But I think it is going to be important to show support for those types of endeavors, especially as this plan is going to be a city and county plan. So that also gets to some of what you were saying, Derwin, in terms of these lines are imaginary, and if folks can't find what they're looking for in Winston-Salem, then it's going to be spilling over into Forsyth and the unincorporated areas and the other communities.
Definitely. George, thank you for getting ready to say something on 1.2.
Yes, I was just going to echo what you were saying pretty much. I know over the past couple of years, I've reached out to a few county commissioners, and conversations hadn't gone that well around housing. On some other areas, yes, but traditionally that's just not something they've done. But here recently, I would say in the last 2 to 3 months, I have also received some emails and phone calls saying, hey, let's get together and try and sit down and see if there are some things we can try and work out around housing, because I always like to tell people God isn't making any more dirt, so we have to go where the dirt is. So if Kernersville and Walkertown and some of those other areas are open to affordable housing coming out to those areas, I think we need to try and have those conversations sooner than later, so that when the time does come, we can already have a presence. So that means showing up to city council meetings, having unofficial meetings, official meetings with staff, city officials, so that when the time does come, I think people will be more willing and able to have those conversations and actually take action behind those as well.
Yeah. Okay. Put our heads together, just kind of think of what putting together a conversation looks like. What does that be? How we bring that together, and then figure out how to set something up to do that as part of what we're doing. And that may even be something from one of the committees that they're able to facilitate there too. It's cool. All right. Anything else? All right. So what I have, we will send out to the group these dates in terms of meetings that will be taking place to see if there's any desire from members to participate in that. Based on a response from members, we'll make a decision on what August will look like, whether we kick into the committee meetings or just a regular meeting of the coalition, or none of the above with that, just meetings themselves. As well, I'll send out to the group a doodle poll in reference to participation on the committees themselves. And then we just have a working question here about how to have a broader conversation within the county around housing. And we'll continue to work to get that meeting as I opened up with the council member and some of the other community partners here around our work and where we stand with that.
One question, were we able to actually disseminate the letter to everyone, or was that going to wait until after the July recess?
It's communicated now. I guess the question is response, and that's that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Derwin, I have one more thing for you guys. It's just to save the date. We're getting ready to roll out an invite for a conference on housing in general for the Triad, September 28th. That'll be an all morning meeting with 3 sessions. And it's really intended for everybody involved in housing, including affordable housing. So I will send you all the link to that once we go live. It's going to be at Guilford Tech's Cameron campus, which is over by the airport. And we expect to have about 250 people there. And sessions are going to be on the state of housing in the Triad, housing development 101, like what goes into developing housing, why it takes so long, why it's so expensive, and then a keynote after that. So and we'll be serving breakfast and lunch. So I'll get you guys the details once it should roll out next week.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. With that, if we don't have anything else, then appreciate everybody's attendance and participation this morning. We'll look to have that doodle poll out to you by Monday. Will be my goal to get that out to you no later than Monday, maybe this evening, but by Monday to get that doodle poll out so that we can make sure we make plans for next month. Cool.
Good. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Everybody have a good weekend. Stay cool.
Thank you all.
Take it easy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.